I try to be a man of my word. I said 9 o'clock. We're going to open this up and just start the conversation. But sometimes life intervenes, and you got to make decisions and set priorities. So I prioritize taking care of some things before I started the podcast. So we're about 10 minutes late to the start. So hopefully everyone can forgive me. I think we've got a couple people who are ready to jump in here as soon as life allows them to. And we're going to see if we can get some during pod and post pod trades to happen. Um, this is trade deadline week. So um, in the past, we've seen a flurry of activity that has led to all sorts of things that change the face of the playoffs and the closing months of the year. Uh, but I think, we've seen a little bit less of that this year. Some are more active traders are tied up at the moment in terms of what they can trade, myself included. Um, and we've seen a lot of the assets that usually change hands already be consolidated. I think Dolphins has 80 picks to his name right now. I know I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I don't think I'm probably too far off. So when you have situations like that, it's tough to make a deal because a lot of the things you normally have to trade with, you don't have. So we'll talk a little bit about what each team could be including or doing to make themselves better. Um, Again, we'll try and go team by team here, but we'll see what ends up happening. RJ, thank you for joining. I started the podcast just immediately because we're a little bit late jumping into it. So not to catch you live, but we are live. But thought is we'll just kind of go through and start talking teams. And if that leads to ideas or offers that we make or offers that other people should make, we don't have to go into any particular order. Just kind of, hey, what are some things that we think are interesting or ways that teams can be embracing where they're going a little bit more. Any other trade related thoughts before we jump into it from you, RJ?
Uh, Not yet. So once we get into teams and specifics, I will probably add things, but I'm just getting settled right now.
Hey, no worries. Take your time. So I realize I took away the 10 to 15 minutes that we usually have to get ourselves centered on some of these things. So no rush, but again, just thinking through a couple of ideas here. So I'm going to randomly pick a team here. I'm literally scrolling up and down and going to see where my mouse lands, and it lands on son of a bitch, the Panthers. Um, so let's talk a little bit about what the Panthers need to be doing here. So if I open up the standings, I think they are leading the South at this point,
Nope,
although it's a
second.
lot. The Panthers they are second in the South to the Buccaneers at 6-6, the Buccaneers at 7-5, and the state of the NFC is that that wild card is going to be a tough thing to lock down. The 49ers are looking pretty good, 3 games ahead of 6-6. The Commanders are 2 games ahead, and we have the Lions, we have the Panthers, the Falcons, the Giants, and the Rams all at 6-6. So that's what 5 teams fighting for that last spot at 6-6, and 2 games behind the team ahead of them. So um, catching up or pulling away isn't out of the question, but it's going to be tougher here. So if you're the Panthers, and um, let's take an honest, objective view of this, are you buying or are you selling?
So the Panthers have been on a bit of a slide, if I'm not mistaken. They've lost 3 of their last 4. They were in a far better standing a few weeks ago. I think this is still a team that should probably be in that like buying mode. Um, I still view them as like one of the top tier uh, teams in the NFC. Sure, record doesn't necessarily reflect it, but their points for is really good, and that's a good reflection of just it's a solid team. Uh, I don't know how much buying power they have. That's the biggest thing. So it may be a situation of, yeah, no picks. So breaking down young, talented players into maybe a little bit more consistent veteran play. Getting Jameis was a huge help to them, especially because Will Levis, we're not quite sure what's going to happen. I'm sure Levis will come back as the starter, but you know, don't know how healthy he's going to be long term. Losing Brian Thomas is a huge hit. I don't know how long he's going to be out, but I know he hasn't been practicing and he has chest problems. So yeah, maybe breaking down like a young defensive end or one of the young wide receivers into an older wide receiver and a little bit more depth wouldn't be a bad option. But that's about all I can really see for Panthers, like as far as like what they can do moving wise.
Well, again, and let's also take the other side. And again, I think you're right. Based off of their success, buying seems to be the more realistic thing to be doing here. But if they decided to sell and kind of say, look, I have Zach Moss, Tajay Spears at some point is going to get a couple of games and be helpful. Or maybe he hangs on him and says, okay, if I move Moss, if I move Cup, if I moved Allen, Thielen is obviously injured for him as well. He's got some defensive players. He's got a lot of youth on this team. So he could also just kind of say, and he did this last year, so it would not shock me if he just kind of stepped back and said, this ain't going to be my year, but let me repurpose and repivot on a couple of these things and do what I need to do so that I'm better positioned for next year. Like Will Levis was a gamble. I think it was a well set gamble, but this happens every year. Like it looked like, hey, he's got D Hop, he's got Ridley, he's got all of these pieces, and he's going to be able to make the leap this year. And it happened to pick it last year, and we all just kind of said, well, shit, we missed on that one. It's not done with him, though, too. He'll have an opportunity to win that job next year, just based off of the times he's had success. He'll get one more shot at this, probably as somebody else comes in to potentially win that job. But, that's probably not the franchise quarterback everyone thought it was going to be. But let's reposition a little bit. Benson needs time to overtake Connor, probably more than everyone expected. Another year is going to help Tajay catch up and if not pass Pollard. And frankly, this is going to give him an opportunity. He was a first-round pick. I was going to say to potentially renegotiate that. And then he's got a lot of really good young talent in other spots on offense. And we're not talking about Tip. We're never fucking talking about Tip. But kind of everything else, you have the foundational pieces. So moving off one of those to try and compete probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But maybe selling a couple of these things to stock the cabinet a little bit does. And the problem is finding somebody who's going to give you the right value for a Cup or a Winston that you just bought or, a Keenan Allen. But kind of James has always been great at being creative in trades. So I'd be interested in seeing if he has considered the sell side, and if he did, what he would be able to kind of stir up here once he started getting a little creative with it.
Yeah, that would be interesting. You've already said it. It's more about finding the necessary trade partners to do that. But I still think there's some of them out there.
Right. Again, one of the ones I think about that would be an interesting one, although I don't know if their pieces line up, is like the Steelers. Like they're clearly still trying to go after this and things like that. But I think he's also moved out of a lot of his youth on his team right now. So it would have to be some kind of offense for defense or injured reserve type acquisition or something like that to make that make sense. And again, I'd want to be primarily in the AFC if I could. But could someone with the Titans work out that he ships him a couple of pieces that keeps him afloat until McCaffrey comes back so he has a shot in the playoffs and restocks the shelves a little bit in terms of some of the younger pieces there or some of the picks that he still has. are the Jets trying to round out their roster and realize that, well, they could get the bye and get into the second round with what they have? They need some help to get any further than that in the playoffs right now. So, again, I think there's interested teams that if he decided to flip the script a little bit, he could sell to. But I think it requires him to think a little bit differently than he wanted to this year. All right, let's come up with another team name here. One random. I got this guy up in the south again. So, scroll. Jaguars. 5-7. They should be selling. They have been selling. Actually making some trades, which has been nice to see. God, they could make such a splash if they actually pushed in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Kyren Williams is the most intriguing fantasy asset of the last 5 years for me. And let me say that I'll put a few more words to that so that it makes a little bit of sense. In the way he was nothing, then he broke out last year, but didn't seem like he could stay healthy. Came into this year with a draft late Corum. They talk about he's going to be involved in kind of a split backfield with Corum, and Kyron's going to hang on to the punt returning duties. You're like, this guy is beyond fucked. But this week is the first time this year that he has not scored a touchdown when he played. He has 8 touchdowns on the year, is averaging about 4 yards a carry, has got 20 receptions and 2 touchdowns to the air as well, so 10 touchdowns total. And like I mentioned, this was the first week that he had a receiving touchdown, so still scored, but he has scored a touchdown every single week this year.
Yeah, he is. I mean, in redraft, he is debatably the number 1 player in fantasy.
Yeah. But then again, like, this is a Sean McVay offense. You have to be worried about the other shoe dropping at some point. Cooper Kupp was the an impeachable wide receiver 1 in terms of targets, and then Puka Nacua comes out of nowhere. Corum at some point is going to get a larger share of the backfield. At some point, Stafford's going to start to break down. Shit's going to happen here. So if I'm the Jags, I have what is perceived as the number 1 asset. Anybody who needs to add a running back and has draft capital to do it should be trying to add this player. And again, if the Panthers decided he wanted to go for it a little bit here, I would be out saying, what do I need to add to Trey Benson to get Kyren Williams? Now, that's not kind of Panthers style, but those are the kind of conversations you have. What do you add to Jonathan Brooks to get Kyren Williams? What do you add to, young running back who's in their first or second year and something to get Kyren Williams?
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting. I definitely think Kyron's one of those assets that probably should be moved off of rather than held on to. But I think Jags has a pretty decent stockpile of those type of players to just move off of. I wouldn't hate to see Jacobs get moved. I want to say Calvin Ridley, but like the work is like his production is just so recent that I almost want to see him move some of his other guys like Matt Collins and yeah, I'd be interested to see what he would get for Calvin Ridley also. I mean, his defense at this point is pretty slim. Yeah, defensive ends aren't super appealing. I mean, contracts are amazing, but especially for Judon, but I don't know who's paying up for a guy that's scoring single digits every game.
Yeah, and maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's something like Kyren and Judon for Fisk and Benson or something like that as a starting point or something. I don't know. That could be something that could work between the two teams we've talked about so far, or at least a framework or something to go. Again, the $17 million receiver, I could see someone like you offering Diggs and saying, okay, can I offer Diggs in a pick or Diggs in a developmental player or something like that? Diggs is still going to have value next year. So it's not like he's taking the old guy who's about to fall off. It's, I'm trading something at a price point for something else at a price point, and you're getting something in advance here. So getting a little bit creative there. I think other pieces here, unfortunately, they haven't popped the way he needs them to move off of. But I'm trying to remember, did Deshaun Elliott score like this last year as a safety, or is this his breakout year?
No, he's been pretty consistent as like a productive safety. He just, if I'm not mistaken, he's bounced around quite a bit as far as like who he's played for.
Well, that's what I mean. He's got 2 years left on his contract right now. He's 27, so you don't want to extend him too far. But at the way he's scored, he's got to be close to the Pro Bowl this year.
Yeah, he's definitely one of those players in the secondary that's actually, like scratching it like just straight up for a third round pick. Maybe a little bit better.
So it's kind of like, okay, safety is safety. I got it. But could he be flipping him to a team like Saints where he's acquiring some of those pieces that are going to potentially grow in value based off of where they are, and he's not afraid of taking points on right now. I know he has a couple of the safeties I took that have been kind of growing in stature. Like, go get one of those guys, like the kid out of Kansas City or things like that, and kind of have those pieces develop on your roster, and then get a pick and a young player for it to build around here.
Yeah, I agree. Elliott is definitely one of those players that you can see that type of a move happening, because he is, he's consistently productive. Giants is on in the background.
All right, I kept checking every couple of minutes to see when he was going to jump in here, so he must have come in the last minute or two while I was not paying attention, but that's okay. We're doing kind of random team reviews here to see what they should be doing. We did Panthers and we did Jags by roll of the dice. Right now we're at, God, the gods hate me. Seahawks. So he's an interesting one because he has the capital to remake this team and actually push in. But at 9-3 and tied with the 49ers, if he wanted to reload for one more year, he could. The problem is, he's already remade kind of his offense to be able to do something this year. And it's almost like just if you're going to unmake it, then that's going to be so much harder to get to the form you need it to. But you have the picks to pivot if you have to or you want to. It would be nice for him to have something better than Tyrod to back up Rodgers right now because Rodgers is struggling so much. He's got a deep bench at running back, a deep bench at receiver, and Pitts is showing out well enough that between him and Bowers, he's set there. So the offense is good to go, but add a D end or two, fill out the defense, and upgrade maybe one or two of the backs using some of your picks. And you go from being a is he or isn't he to a real contender.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I don't even think he needs to dip that deep into his well to solidify his place in that contender area. Like DN, definitely. If he could add a premium defensive end from Bills or Commanders for some of those picks, that would be a really good add, in my opinion, for him. The receivers performing well so far, but I'm a little worried about that room. I wouldn't mind upgrading one of those players either. But obviously, he's got the tight ends. He's got Chubb behind Achane. Like, he's going to get his running back points. So it's really a defensive end. And like, can you upgrade one of those receivers to like a more alpha guy?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. Like, of the receivers I would want to upgrade, like, Downs has been the one who scored the highest. And then it's like, okay, Debo's had his injury issues, but they're about to hit a bye and come off of that. So that should help him get healthy. And that's kind of how he rolls at the right time. Higgins is starting to come into his own more. So it's almost okay, I understand wanting to upgrade to one of those guys to the stud, but which one and who's available? Like, obviously, Quentin Johnson's the one that you feel probably the least confident about right now. But
Yeah.
I had to pick to Quentin Johnson, and what's that get me to? That gets me probably at best to the Downs or if I'm lucky, the Debo tier.
Well, Browns just put AJ Brown on this bait, right? Like, could you add a pick to Debo and get AJ Brown?
But I mean, is that the proper like use of value?
Yeah, maybe not.
Like that's so.
I didn't realize we were the Pats first. Oh my god!
Looking at this team, it's one of those weird ones where it's like his higher end players are on the lower end of that tier, but his depth pieces are value wise on the higher end. So like either way you're moving like a substantial amount of like picks on top of whatever player it is just to get incrementally better, whether you're moving inside like one of the top 2 tiers of wide receiver. Like T Higgins is already like arguably top 12 wide receiver right now, like as far as like redraft. So like what are you going to do? You're going to get the 7th best or the 5th best, and then like everybody else it's going to cost substantially more to like get into like a higher tier. But so like, if you upgrade using Josh Downs, there's some bit of value as far as like what Josh Downs is that you're going to lose just trying to upgrade.
Yeah, I would stick to like the older players, right? Like to me, like Debo and Chubb are like the 2 pieces I would look to upgrade with someone younger and more established with that pick personally. Just because it fits like the rest of his roster, other than quarterback where he's got old man Rodgers. But I mean, ultimately, like I think defensive end is like the priority piece. The fact that he's the Pats pick, like he should just be using all of his picks, and he has your pick, RJ. Like he should be using those 2 firsts and just adding 2 premium pieces here to not just clinch his division, which I think he'll do anyways, but also just to be one of the strongest teams in the NFC.
I mean, in my opinion, he just takes the New England pick and he goes and buys TJ Watt from the Bills and just you sit on everything else.
Yeah.
It's a little rich for 30-year-old TJ Watt, in my opinion, but
rich for the guy that's scoring close to 20 every week.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Isn't that
what is Pats right now?
Well, I mean, and that's the challenge here is it feels rich. That's probably the right price for a player like TJ Watt in terms of what he's scoring at a position of need and of that contract.
Yeah, Pats is around 11. He's a little bit further down the list than I thought. I was thinking he was in like the 5 range. So
yeah,
right.
That's okay. That's not as bad as I was thinking.
So, but again, I know we just spent time talking about it, and I think Seahawks will gladly tell us tomorrow, like, great, glad you guys talked about my team last night. I'm not going to do shit. Because his mantra has always been that of almost control, of wanting to control the interaction so that people are coming to him so he can demand his price, or controlling when he makes certain moves so that he's getting the most value out of it. And it's allowed him to build a really good team. So I can't fault him for the approach. But, it's a difference of it's the Moneyball, conversation of, hey, Moneyball makes sense when you've got 162 games in a season because it's going to, over time, produce better results. But when you have 2 games, 3 games, 4 games, sometimes you've got to be a little bit, different in terms of the ways you play the percentages.
Yep.
So,
Yeah. But I feel like it's like, what are we doing here, right? Like he's gonna win his division. He has a shot to make the championship, but like not without, I think, investing a bit more into the current roster.
that's what we're saying is he and I see the parallels in different divisions right now. And the NFC West, for me, parallels very well with the AFC East. The Niners are a bit of an anomaly in that comparison at 9-3, but due to the level of injury he is sustaining, unless these guys get healthy, he's not really more than a one and done conversation there. It's if I look at the strength that is the Seahawks versus the strength that is the Jets right now, I think those are comparable teams. It's just the fact that the Jets have had a much more favorable schedule and are 12-0, where the Seahawks, where they scored 60 points less over the 12 games, so less than 5 points per game difference. And I know that we had double headers there, so it's probably closer to like 7 or 8 points per game different on scores of 200 plus per week. So we're not talking about a huge difference in quality of roster. But one's 12-0 and one's 9-3.
And one's 6-6. It's
Well,
like sort of in that same range.
But again, that's why that's intriguing right now. So yeah, I think TJ Watt is a good example. And I think he can do this in such a way that he can keep it young. I think he can take some of these picks and invest in younger producing players at these positions and get 90 to 95% conversion on the asset. So I'm sure we'll find some more as we go through here, but let's mix it up and pick our next team here. And we're going to pick the Patriots. 4-8 does not have his pick, is not going to make the playoffs, and has a wild collection of young assets. Only 29 of them on his active roster right now. So scoring points is a bit of a challenge because of a lack of depth. But that said, because I don't think he has any players in the triple digits except for Adebo, who he just traded for, who's on IR. But again, if you give this team another year of seasoning and add to it maybe free agency and add a quarterback, like he's got the makings of something. So Pats loves the trade. So he's going to look to make an offer, and his bait has said he's going to respond to offers as they come up. But what do you do with this roster right now?
Hold. He has the I'm proud of Pats because he's played this pretty smart. He has the Colts pick, so he has somebody else doing the legwork of getting him a top 10 pick. So I don't know, he could maybe move some of his aging assets for slightly cheaper younger assets, stuff like that. He doesn't really have the need to make his team worse. If anything, you might want to make his team better.
I think he would if he had the right deal for those picks. Yeah, but I agree. He's got a pretty good base here that just needs to age a bit and fill into their roles. I think he's just doing Moneyball, right? If he can flip something for a bit more value or an extra pick, that's just kind of the life he needs to be in right now. He only has those 2 firsts next year, right? He doesn't have any additional picks. So it's he needs to just keep waterfalling assets into more depth, and more shots at adding to the holes here.
So everybody may, like some of the people trying to get the player may hate that I say this, but the one thing that I would do if I was Patriots is take KJ Britt off of my trade bait and just let him gain value. Like he's going to be wildly expensive in the offseason.
Less than $1 million contract, 3 years left on it. And yeah, he is gaining responsibility in Tampa as others are fading away. I wanted to go back. I think he adjusted his trade bait during the day today, but I think he also then stripped it. So let me try and find it.
He doesn't have one posted.
He should also probably like try and sell high on like Isaac Garendo. I know he just got him. I thought he like paid a bit much for him, but like now that
he's actually worth what he paid now.
Yeah, now that he had that game, like try and just recoup that that value. I don't know if like Titans is looking to secure some shares of that backfield as a hedge for McCaffrey coming back or getting re-injured. That could be a place to like take a look at. But yeah, he's definitely got pieces, and it's unfortunate because like if some of these guys had popped like just a little bit more in like the first month or two of the season here, like he probably could be selling them for more, right? Like Troy Franklin or Luke McCaffrey or God forbid Roman Wilson saw the field. Like if one of those guys had just like had a big game, he could re-up on some of that investment from those picks.
I was gonna say I feel like he actually got lucky. A lot of those names are guys that, like, even though they don't have great point outputs, like, even when we get to the offseason, those guys will retain 90% of their value, like, from the last offseason. Like, McCaffrey will be hyped as a pass catcher for Washington next year. Franklin will probably move into a larger role in Denver. Ben Sinnott, like, fantastic to just like sit on.
Yeah.
The guy's put up 10 points and he's probably worth just as much as he did in the offseason.
Well, he's only catch the touchdown, so he's not 100% touchdown rate. So,
like we could argue that like what he paid for Thule was a bit much, but like he's good. And he's probably going to take over a full-time role once one of the old guys leave. So, like, he's done a good job on buying players that aren't going to depreciate. Just a matter of, like, now more hold on to them until, like, their value really starts to go up.
Yeah, I mean, and I think he will be patient. Like, I know he doesn't – I don't think he needs – or should like try and flip a bunch of things at the deadline here because like it doesn't change anything for his outlook other than is he going to get more value today than he would in the off season, right? That's like really what the calculus he needs to be doing on these pieces.
You should try to buy points from Colts.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that would be interesting.
It's a fun trade idea. I like it. All right. Do you want me to go random again, guys? Or do you guys have a team in mind you want to talk about?
Oh, random's fun.
All right.
It's our bias out of it.
Going back and forth. Well, this one will be fast. The Dolphins. 40 players on his active roster is meeting his salary cap level here with 76 million in dead cap. Um,
That's truly impressive.
let me review.
I was trying to see how many 25 picks he still has. Jesus.
1, 2, 3, whatever. Counting's just a dumb idea right now. Swimming in picks.
He's got like 18 or 20. Yeah, like it's 5 first still.
He's got
Including
more picks than he's going to be
three
able
that are
to.
going to be like top 10. Saints, Raiders, and Dolphins, right? Like that'll be fun.
Raiders maybe at 4 and 8. He's at the same range as Pats.
Yeah.
Saints I feel is in that range. No, Saints is at 2 and 10, so that's probably up there. His is going to be top 10.
His is going to be 1.
Yeah.
Maybe 2, but yeah, I mean it's.
So he and Chargers are neck and neck here for that first pick. Now, there's 2 ways he can play this. He can continue to try and shed points and, jockey with Chargers for being that first pick. Or you can say, fuck it. You can have the first pick. I'll take the second pick and start buying some points here. Because let's take a quick look in terms of his remaining schedule. I don't think he's really at risk of beating anybody down the stretch. He's got the Bills, he's got the Seahawks, he's got the Cardinals, he's got the Lions, and he's got the Jets. So I know the Cardinals are a tanking team, but he has enough starters on his team that Dolphins won't have trouble there. And the Bills still have enough points on his roster, unless he sheds a bunch this week, that he's not going to be in danger of losing there. The other 3 teams are in the playoff hunt. So he could pick up 20, 30, 40 points here in terms of stuff that is going to position him better for next year and put himself in probably a better buying opportunity with some of those picks. He probably has better buying value now than in the offseason.
Yeah, the other thing you could do is just like buying every like IR player with some of the like people who are just desperate to flip IR players for something that they can flip into something to help them win. He could try and get some value that way. If he didn't want to add points, I think he wants. Is there another? There's not another. Yeah, it's just him and Chargers for the defeated teams. But like Bears and Vikings, like I mean, you guys are also like 1 win away. He doesn't want to go from like 1 to 4, right? Like so if he views that there's a win on his schedule potentially if he adds points, like I think he might want to just hold because like we see what the number 1 pick ends up going for, right? You're going to get 3 good pieces in the offseason if you flip it instead of taking it. And
right.
so
And again, we have to think about what that's going to be too is again, things are going to change between now and the draft. Between now and then, someone is going to be caused to fall in love with, and I'm sure you'll get those 3 pieces for that pick. But as of right now, and I'm not saying this, I'm even saying this is a team who's probably got a top 4 pick. Like, I don't see anybody in that top 5 that really even compares positively to the top 10 of last year. Like, I love my receiver out of Missouri. Everybody knows that. But he has not had the kind of year that Rome and Neighbors and Harrison had last year.
Yeah.
It is not a fair comparison. I mean, on paper, these guys look like they should be compared to him, but they're not. And there's not a quarterback anywhere in the realm of Daniels or Caleb. There are some running backs, which are a little bit better positioned than last year. But it's going to be do we have an Ohtani situation with Travis Hunter? And otherwise, it's your 101's probably coming in at kind of what the 106 or 107 was from talent-wise last year.
I mean, if Travis Hunter comes in as a receiver who plays the occasional corner, like he'll probably be the first pick.
Well, that's what I mean. Is what's the starting eligibility for Hunter if he plays both?
Yeah.
What does MFL do? And do our commissioners need to be thinking about that before he comes into the league?
Yeah.
If I look at the scoring settings right now, and I probably should have done this before bringing it up on the podcast, but not always the most prepared host. We recognize that. You have receivers who have 2 points per tackle, a point per assist, 3 points per sack in the quarterback, and then pretty good points per yardage for it. Corner gets a point per reception, the same as a receiver does.
I mean, if he's honestly, even if he's at corner, that that still might be a consideration. If you're going to get 20 points at your corner guaranteed from the combo of
the receivers get the same points as
Yeah.
corners do on the defensive positions.
Yeah. So there's the weirdness of him, but also these running backs, right? Like the landing spots are going to be so interesting because it's like a deeper running back class, but if Genty goes to the Cowboys, right? That's probably 101. And some of the other landing spots could be kind of like someone going to Minnesota could be really interesting. Where because what's his name? Aaron Jones is pretty old. I don't know. There's a couple different offenses that would be very interesting to see where some of these pieces land. Like the Giants would probably add a running back at some point in the draft. Chicago, even I don't know. It'll be really interesting. But I still think the plan with 101 should almost always be you sell it to someone who is thirsty for the top pick in the draft and willing to package 3 players for it. That makes you kind of instantly maximizing your value on that pick.
Yeah, and again, with a team like Dolphins, who, if he doesn't have that pick, is going to have the assets to go get that pick in addition to his 2 other top 5s with everything else that he has.
Yeah.
If I'm Chargers, that's the deal I'm holding out for. Can I get Dolphins to give me 2 firsts and 3 seconds for my 101, and one of those firsts is going to be at 112 and the other one's going to be 117, and those seconds are going to be in the top 20 of the round, so I'm going to end up with 5 top 50 picks for that player. That's what I'm aiming for here.
I just don't know if that'll be the approach he takes. I could see him standing pat and making all of his selections in 25, or at least the early picks, the first and second round picks, and then going at it again in 26. I don't even know how many firsts he has in 26. Let's see. He's got just his first in 26, but a bunch of seconds and thirds. Good God. Hopefully he is going to be pre-drafting at some point during these drafts. My God.
All right. We'll come back and keep going through trades here. I think I need to reposition here to going through the trades that have happened so far, and then start transitioning the conversation so that we can actually start making some trades ourselves here. Otherwise, it's just going to be fucking boring. So let's see. Since last week, how many trades have we had? RJ, I think we agreed to our trade the night of the pod. It just didn't get processed till the next day.
Yep.
We've had 10 trades. RJ, do you want to start with our trade while I take care of some league business I need to elsewhere, and then I will circle back and pick it up from 9?
Sure. 1 second. Let me pull them up. All right. So it was Paulson Adebo, Isaac Yadam, and a second-round pick for Jaquan Jackson, Cedric Wilson, Malik Mustafa, Darnell Savage, and a third-round pick. Basically buying a bit more depth at safety, depth at wide receiver, which, in hindsight was a great move for me now. I lose out on a Debo who I know he had surgery earlier in the week.
Is he out for the year?
Definitely.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, to like get the third back, right? So like you're essentially moving down a round, and then you're adding like two bodies at safety, both of whom are players that I've liked, even though they're not like big point getters. And then Cedric Wilson, who kind of fell into the wide receiver 1 temporarily, wide receiver 2 role.
Yep.
For New Orleans right now, like this is exactly what you do when you're trying to be competitive, and you have an asset and you can like waterfall it down into like points across a couple of different places, right?
Yep. Yeah, I was a big fan of it. The biggest thing that I got was Mustafa, who I think does have like good long-term value.
Yeah, I like Mustafa. Yeah.
But still a gamble. One of those players that a lot of us look at and go, he should probably get more playing time. But like coaches haven't necessarily agreed, even though he's flashed. So fingers crossed, hopefully he's a starter next year. But I think this was good for, an in-season move. My wide receiver floor got significantly better.
Only for it to get impact.
Oh. Yeah. All right. So next up, we'll do Bucks and Raiders. So Samaje Perine, Durham Payne, John Stevens, Janarius Robinson, and Jordan Poyer, along with a San Francisco's first-round pick in 2025 and the Giants' second-round pick in 2026 for Michael Wilson, Aziz Al-Shaair, and Justin Reed, along with 2 fourths. So, was Shaair hurt before this?
I think so. He didn't play week 7. Yeah.
Okay. That would have been unfortunate if he got hurt and Bucks had already purchased him.
Yeah, even still with like it's like a first and a second, both hopefully later in the round, and like a bunch of roster fodder for Michael Wilson, which you might even argue is like maybe just worth it almost by itself, plus Aziz Al-Shaair and Justin Reed, like 2 players that I also like at linebacker and safety, and some force to play around with still. Like what he ended up sending both of those, I think, for Deontay Banks later. Again, this is a similar kind of scenario, right? Like take some assets, break them down into points across multiple positions to help your depth for the second half of the season here and into the playoffs. I'll be honest, I've never heard of John Stevens, and the fact that he gave this undrafted tight end I've never heard of a 4-year deal is just quintessential Bucks. My God.
Yeah, I'm not aware of who that guy is. I think it was a fantastic buy for Bucks. I think it was great for Raiders. Michael Wilson was one of those guys that you definitely hoped that he would have popped this year, but with Greg Dortch,
good, honestly, like
right,
he's got 10 points at least a game. That's pretty solid.
Well, it's one of those things. It's like he easily could have been the third guy on like in that wide receiver room, and then his value isn't this. So I like capitalizing on it now. Like it's another opportunity because we knew he was good from his rookie year.
Yeah.
But it was just a matter of like, did Raiders hold on too long? Well, now he has a second opportunity to profit.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, the next one. Patriots giving up the Chiefs 2026 first for Justice Hill and Bryce Huff. So,
yeah, this is interesting, right? Like this is the kind of it's a similar scenario we've been talking about with Pats trying to like proliferate down value, right? So he breaks down a late first and 26 for 2 pieces. I don't know that I think they're combined worth a first, but they're also kind of buying low on Huff, hoping that he can kind of be what he had been previously. And then Justice Hill has been quite relevant this year, but he had to extend him, I think, because he was on a 1-year deal. He needs to flip Hill for something, I think, to like make this make sense to me, because I don't think Hill's like a long-term asset to hold.
So I think this was a fine deal for Patriots. When I look at it, Bryce Huff throughout most of the offseason, he's a fairly reasonably priced defensive end who has had production in the past. So he's definitely worth probably that borderline like first, second range. I think at most Justice Hill was worth probably a third in the offseason.
Yeah.
But his workload has kind of, bumped that value up to where like I could see somebody getting a late second for Justice Hill, like just by himself. So I do agree, probably sell Hill to make a little bit. But I don't hate the idea of just hoping that Bryce Huff is going to find his way back to being productive, because then he's easily worth the first by himself.
Yeah, that's fair. The Hill, like he could be a renegotiation candidate too, or like he's 18 million right now. He'll be 27 at the end of the season. So like you get that down to 9 million. That's a little more digestible, and like he's a receiving back, right? Like he's got a skill set that like he could theoretically like stay in the league for 4 years, and that might also be like the only person on his roster that's like worth using a renegotiation on at the moment. So like something to keep in mind.
He does a lot of things that don't necessarily get into like the stat sheet that keeps him around. Like he's been a Raven for 6 years. Like he's a good football player.
Yeah.
So never going to be a high-end running back or anything, but definitely will be one of those that will be on the field enough to where you can get 5 points out of him most weeks.
Yeah.
All right, on to the next one. All right, I give up. I traded away Von Bell and the Baltimore third for Quandre Diggs and 2025 fifth.
This was interesting because like they've had really similar production.
Yep.
They're both old. So it's like I don't know if I would have spent a third for the swap personally. If that fifth was a fourth, I maybe feel better. But then like what are we really saying? Like this late round corner instead of this like random depth shot in the fifth is like the difference here. It's whatever.
Yeah, so we were getting to the point where like I had to make some taxi decisions, and that definitely played into it. I wouldn't say that it was the overwhelming factor, but like, when you look at it and go, I saved $3.5 million, it makes you more inclined to do something like this. I basically paid up for the extra contract year, the cap savings.
$9 or less, yeah.
Right. And I didn't think that there was anything that was going to really help my team that was on the market that was just worth a third. So it was kind of like I didn't see anything that I really could just buy straight up for a third, and there wasn't anything that I was super impressed with, like, trade this third for whatever player in a fourth. So I was just like, what's the best way that I can, stop going through this taxi headache, hold on to a quality player for like an extra period of time. And Von Bell, he plays like 89% of the snaps, but you'd think he was the third safety with like the stats that he puts up. So like at this point, I was done with him. I didn't want to pay $4 million for, a guy that's going to sit on my bench most of the time. But I'll definitely pay 700,000 for a guy that's probably going to get the same type of work, maybe a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm back. I can jump in on my next one. Pat's making a well-timed purchase of Isaac Guerrero right before his fantastic Sunday night game, grabbing Paulson Adebo and his cheap contract as he's on the IR, and swapping the Texans first for the Jets first while giving up Derek Brown. I think realistically, probably Derek Brown and the two pieces of their players I gave up on this are probably close to the same value before this, although Guerrero may have popped a little bit above that. And while the Jets are undefeated and the Texans are likely a wild card team or fighting for a division win, these picks may not be very far apart. Jets may be getting out of the first round, whereas the Texans probably have to play someone a little bit better. So it may be a 3 or 4 pick difference, if anything, or there's the very real possibility that the Texans pick is later than the Jets pick, if things break right for the Texans. But this is a good pivot.
I apologize earlier. I think I forgot that you sent a first with this. So when I was mentioning how Pat's paid a bit more for Guerrero than I would have thought. It's because I didn't remember the trade properly. So I revoke that earlier comment. Yeah, this seems really even to me. I think, like you're getting a second, and Adebo will probably be extended. And he was incredibly productive this year. He's only 25. Like he's likely going to be their starter next year. With who knows what Lattimore will happen with him and his contract, and he's older. So like. Derek Brown, who knows with his injury, and I think this is like a pretty even trade, and he turns the defensive points into offensive points, and then he popped. So like, if he can capitalize on that, then he's in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, it's kind of what's not to like there. Yeah. Let's see. Saints moving Thielen, Whittington, and Womack for Jameis and Bishop. I enjoyed this trade for the fact of the creativity to it. I don't know if Thielen's a second or a third at this point. And I don't know if Whittington, he definitely probably had a third in value as he popped. But if anything happened to Kupp, I feel like he would pop in value too. So these are 3 intriguing pieces that Saints can use going forward. But then Winston gives him a couple of opportunities.
I feel like it was a cheap starting quarterback for the rest of the year. Like I think Thielen, they clearly have had some of their younger guys pop, and I assume they would be getting the run as their season is essentially over already, over the old guys. They just shipped out Deontay Johnson, I think is part of that. Let's see what we got in the youngins. Whittington, I agree. He had a nice 2-game stretch here when both Puka and Kupp were out. I guess you have to bank on an injury there. But, all in all, if I'm Panthers, I send a bunch of roster fodder essentially for my roster to upgrade my starting quarterback for the playoff run here. Seems like a big win for him. And he got a corner who's fairly productive as well.
All right. Let's see. Jags, Broncos. Broncos moving off of Marquise Brown and Luke Musgrave, 2 injured players who have. I like Musgrave a lot. His future may be a little muddled for Mechie and Van Jefferson. Van had a nice game and seems to be performing a little bit better with the moon ball approach that Wilson seems to favor. And again, John Mechie, the talent is there. 4 targets last game is a nice adjustment for him. So can he build off of that with Nico missing time? Again, didn't pay a lot to do this. I'd much rather have what the Jags got than what they gave up, especially considering their position. But these are the types of deals he needs to be seeking out rather than have Broncos probably come to him with.
Yeah. It was a fine trade. I don't know. I have no real issues with it. In the offseason, I probably would have hated it, but Musgrave's basically dead to me at this point.
Yep, Tucker Craft season.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it like from Bill's point of view, right? Like these are like wide receiver points that'll help him now. So I get it, but like I think I like the value that he sent out long term much better. Unlike Marquise Brown, if he comes back next year to the Chiefs or wherever he ends up playing, still young. He's only 27, and Musgrave, like we'll see, right? He was their tight end 1 last year. Does he take that role back? Metch is interesting for sure with the injuries there too. So it's interesting move. I think it makes sense for both of the teams in terms of their situation, but I do kind of like the two hurt guys better value wise.
Well, yeah, so the question is, to your point about Marquise, if someone asked me to place, if say Keep Trade Cut asked me to place a value on him, I would have a hard time valuing him for other players right now because especially at that contract level at $9 million, if he's going to get an opportunity to be a 1 or a 2 someplace, that's a great contract. That is a thing to add, a thing to hold on to, and a thing to potentially count on as a 2 or a 3 receiver on your team next year. If he can't get signed or he doesn't get signed until very late in the process, that is an albatross contract and one that you have to pay someone to eat so they can cut it and get the $10 million back for something else on the roster. So if like I wanted to make an offer for Marquise Brown right now, I'd probably offer a third, and I would either get a snap accept or I'd defend the person by sending the offer. Excellent. I'm glad everyone agrees with me.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I think like he will find a role because of his skill set of just being like ridiculously fast. I foresee him like finding a team pretty quickly. If I don't remember if it was a 1-year deal. I think it was a 1-year deal with the Chiefs. Like he could even just be back with the Chiefs, right? Like, so we'll see. But yeah, it could go a couple of ways. But even still, right? Like next year, like Van Jefferson's going to be another year older. He's already slow. Mechie is still going to be wide receiver 3 at best in Houston. That's like if Diggs is gone. So like you're kind of playing with similar shots in the dark there.
Fair enough. All right. Deontay Banks for 2/4. Yeah, I don't care. Neville Hewitt and a 5th for Isaiah McKenzie and a 2nd. So Neville has had almost 34 points the last 2 games. Sorry. Basically almost all 46 of his points over the last 3 games. So he has moved into that position for Houston. Question if he hangs on to it all year or not. But as of right now, he has found money for the Titans at that spot in a situation where Titans needs as much found money as they can get. And then McKinley Jackson, and Tyler Newman for Keenan Benton and a 3rd. Yeah.
Nose tackle in Pittsburgh. I tried to play that game and he kept putting up single digits. So
I really like Benton though. I feel like I mean Newbin's been pretty productive for the safety position, but like I think getting the pick and Benton, who has some pass rush to him, could be interesting.
Yeah, I know
Well,
Bill's.
Bill just collecting Steelers, you know.
Yeah,
Never been something Bill's been trying to do. Plus, I mean, he gets a pick out of it.
Right.
And Newbin, I think, was a third when he got drafted, so he's kind of selling for what he got the safety for, which I guess is fine. All right, so those are the trades. I guess moving back in terms of things that could be happening here. Giants is saying that player I dropped is not really a player I dropped, so that's some fun drama. Talked about a bunch of teams that can and should make trades. What do you think? Should we move to the post pod and kind of get into actually making offers, or?
yeah. I need to find a wide receiver. Let's start some trade talks.
All right.
Yep.
Let's move to the fun part. We'll move that into the league chat so that everyone can join in, and that I can go to sleep when I start falling asleep and not hold anybody up. But let's get to the fun part here. But
Yeah, Commanders, you can just stay here.
I just noticed that I was muted.
well, shit, just in time to join the.
Hey,
I mean, it's a classic Commanders
I'm
game.
here for the fun. I'm here
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
fun part, you know?
Yeah, exactly. You come in for the trade conversation, whether it's here or elsewhere, you're well positioned. But at least we got you to actually talk during the pod this time.
Yeah,
That's
right,
almost it.
right. I mean, last time I tried to get in, but you were just ignoring me. So
Well, I was wrapping up the pod. Like, as I'm going into my last 30 seconds into the wrap up, you're like, "Hey, give me the link." It's like, no, fuck you. It's too late. But anyways, this time it was not too late. So we'll move to the trade conversations. Look, if it warrants an emergency pod tomorrow, we'll find a way to make one happen. But it would have to be some pretty ridiculous amount of activity today to warrant one. So nothing. It hasn't happened before. I just don't see it kind of happening that way.